many of you resist clapping every time you hear that? Before I begin, I just want to give a huge thank you to Scott. I think on behalf of everyone that's here, what an honor it is to be here. I mean, following your vision for this, you're hitting your stride on this, man. So thank you, first of all, for just letting us be here. This is incredible. So this talk is inspired by a couple of things. One of them is the family that I was raised up by. Not in my house, but on TV. How many of you were raised by some TV? Yeah. This talk is inspired by one of my favorite shows growing up of all time, Saved by the Bell. How many of you are Saved by the Bell fans? Yeah, I pictured myself like you, Evan. You were talking about how kids like place themselves in their story. I mean, this is totally it, man. Because I pictured myself in Saved by the Bell. I mean, I would have friends like A.C. Slater, obviously. Zach Morris probably has the car phone, right? The big giant one, yeah. But most importantly, Jesse Spano. Good luck with that caffeine pill addiction, right? So this talk is inspired by Saved by the Bell, and it's based off of a conversation that we had about a year ago now, where we took a staff retreat to California, and we got to spend a day with the children's pastor of Saddleback, good AG guy, Steve Adams, just an incredible guy. If you ever follow him on Twitter or whatever, just so full of wisdom and knowledge. So we were out there, and he was giving us a tour of all of his places, just magnificent auditoriums. I mean, all themed out. They have like an arcade for their 4th through 6th grade area. Just incredible. Their small groups. Absolutely incredible. So we would just walk around. We'd ask him questions like, so what do you do after they're done with small groups? Well, then we go back in for large group, and then this other group comes in. And we just went through the whole day just picking his brain. It was incredible. We got to see, they make like a little time capsule that they give to first-time guests to the nursery. It has like a baby blanket in it. I mean, all these sorts of things we just got to just download from him. So it got to the end of the day, and we were just kind of like recapping what we talked about. And we were in his office, just a magnificent office full of like just his personality and his style. And Scott asked him a question. He said, Steve, how did you just structure your ministry? We were in the middle of like restructuring, trying to figure out roles and responsibilities and things like that. And he said, how did you structure your ministry? And Steve, in just in classic Steve fashion, he said, Scott, that's a great question, man. And I think I know the answer that you're looking for, but do you know the question that I've never been asked before? And we're just like intrigued. It's like, yeah, what is that? What did we miss? It's like, should we write down this question so we can ask it to you later? Like, what is it? And he's like, Scott, I think I know what you're asking. And he's like, people all over the world come and look at our stuff, and they get enamored with the lights and the facilities. And he said, but you know what nobody asks me has ever asked me, is how do you structure your ministry with health? How do you structure your ministry with health? So this talk is based on our conversation with Steve and how to structure your ministry with health. The first thing that he said is you have to know your people. You have to know your people, and I would include in that you have to know yourself. And one of the tools that you can use to do that, there's 3 tools that I recommend that you use to know yourself and to know your people. One would be the DISC assessment. You know, how many of you have ever taken a DISC assessment? Yeah, how many of you forgot which DISC you were? I was like, I think I'm a C. I don't know. But one of those will tell you a lot about yourself. So the DISC assessment. Another one is the Strength Finder. How many of you have ever taken a Strength Finder? Yeah, you get like a list of like 5 things that you are. Like mine are positivity, adaptability, woo, all those sorts of things. Another one would be Standout. How many of you? Actually, about 3 years ago, Mark was here and handed us a Standout book in Minnesota. Again, those tools are incredible for you to use. About a week ago now, our executive pastor gave a training, and we were talking about our strengths. And he said probably one of the most profound things I think I've ever heard about your strengths. And I don't know if this was an original thought or if you read it in a book somewhere. But he said, your strength is your strength, right? No duh. He said, but your weakness is typically your strength out of balance. So for me, I'm a high I. I'm a very people person, people-oriented. Scott gives me credit for all the details, but really it was everybody else. I just brought it in the box with us. So one of my strengths is dealing with people and hanging out with people, getting relationship, things like that. But what I'm terrible with are details. And I'm terrible with like task management and things like that. So that's my weakness because it's my strength out of balance. Because I'm so focused on people, I forget about all the details. So my weakness is my strength out of balance. So you got to know your people. You got to know who you're working with. The second thing is you have to know your plan. Know your plan. To structure your ministry with health, you have to know your plan. I'll give you a story about this. This was probably our first month into being at Victory in Tucson. We were at the point where we were getting bombarded with questions on the weekend that we didn't really like have to give an answer to. You know, how many of you ever had a question like, which way does the toilet paper roll come out of the stall? Which way does it come out? You know, you're like, I don't care, just go do it, right? We were getting bombarded with little questions like that, and it's over, by the way. But we were bombarded, we were bombarded with questions like that. So we decided that we needed to have another layer of leadership underneath us, not to like make us feel important or anything like that, but just to give that the point person that people could go to that wasn't us, because we all know that there are things that only we can deal with, and sometimes these questions that we get asked, we don't have to deal with. So we implemented this level of leadership called the service coordinator. And the service coordinator would handle the service flow, volunteers, like making sure they're in the right spot, make sure check in, check out is ready, make sure the handouts are there, all the details of the ministry. And we started this, and we said, all right, team, here we go, let's go. And I knew what their role was, but I never really pictured how it would actually happen. So the first time a service coordinator came to me with a question, she asked me a question. I don't even remember what the question was, but I just told her, I was like, well, this is what I would do in this situation. And about 2 weeks after doing that, Scott calls me into his office. He says, I've heard you say this to these service coordinators, and why would we have a level of leadership under you where it's their job to do what they think you would do? It's like we have this level of leadership to push those decisions further out so you're not getting asked these questions. So I said, oh, okay, good. That's really good. So I flipped to the complete other side. When they come to me with a question, I would say things like, I don't care. It's your job. Just go do it. I flipped to the complete opposite other side. And the problem is I didn't know the plan. I knew it, but I didn't know it. I didn't know what the plan was because I didn't let it get to my heart yet. So after I feel so sorry. Probably after 3 months of just trying to figure out, okay, they come to me with a question, how do I deal with that? And finally I just decided when they come to me with a question, the best spot, if we're going to get them to make decisions on their own, the best spot for them to think was right in front of me. So when they came to me with a question, I would start saying things to get them to think right in front of me. Because if you're testing out new leaders and if you're not quite sure how they'll react, the best place for them to react is right in front of you, right? So when they come to me with a question, I would ask them things like one question was, what should we cut out of a service? There was 2 of 3 things left in the service. It was the message, the small group, or the game. Pretty clear to all of us in this room which one gets cut, right? Yeah. Kick that guy out. I'm just kidding. So she said, what do you think we should cut out? And I just flipped it back to her. I said, well, what do you think? She's like, well, we've had a game, so we could cut the game, but the kids are having a hard time paying attention today, so we need to cut out the message. And if you're like me, your salvation alarm is going off. Is this person actually saved, right? And so I through a series of questions, I just led her to a point where I said, well, what do you hope that your church wouldn't skip with your kids? Just flipping that. So again, getting them to think right in front of you. So you have to know your plan. You have to know what the plan is before you move forward. And the last thing, and this is something I've recently come on, and it's already starting to revolutionize how we're doing things. It's this. It's know your place. Oops, I skipped 2. You're getting all 3 of them. Know your place. Know your place. You have to understand, and we have to know that with what we're creating and what we're dealing with, is it a driving force of your church? Is it a support to a ministry? Is it its own ministry? You know, I would venture to say that there's a lot of things that we do within children's ministry that isn't actually a ministry. What it is it's a support to a ministry. I'll give you a perfect example. Me and Jason were talking last night about something that God's just laid on my heart. We were challenged in our staff retreat a month and a half ago that the metric that we're measuring our success by is no longer how many people are in your seats of your specific ministry. So it's not how many kids we had on a Sunday morning. It's not how many volunteers we had on a Sunday morning or a Wednesday night. The metric that we're measuring you by from here on out is how well you can replicate yourself. And so feeling like, I missed this my whole entire life. Poof, I'm doing this wrong, right? You're like, yeah, exactly. Just like me, it's like, I've been doing this wrong. We still send in the numbers, and I think they're important, but that's not what we're measuring our success by anymore. And so with that, we were just challenged to replicate yourself. So I walked around, and I was asking the question, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? I was like the most pessimistic person in the world. I was walking around on Sunday, why am I checking this person in? Why am I having to put this Band-Aid on this kid? You know, it's like all these good things that we do on a Sunday morning. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? But I did that with my work week too. I came to find out that about 60% of what I did didn't actually have to be done by me. So freeing up that 60% would be like the media and the graphics and the pro presenter and things that don't necessarily have to be done by me. So we're still fresh in these talks of what it's going to look like. But I sat down, I laid it all out on my whiteboard. I was like, this is what the video guy is going to do, and the graphics and the photography and the editorial. These are what all these people are going to do. And I brought Scott in. I said, Scott, here's what's on my heart. What do you think? And he's like, this is yours, this is not yours, this is something that you are never going to give up. But just through that process of refinement, he said, Scott, you could probably write a book on this. And I mean this seriously. At the end of the talk, at the end of that conversation, he said, Ryan, with this team that you're creating, I love it, and I want you to go for it. But he said this, and it's the most cliche thing I think I've ever heard in my entire life. But he said, don't let the cart drive the horse. He said, this team is not a ministry. This team is a support to the ministry. This team is not going to tell the children's ministry team that a block party is not a good idea. You have to know your place in your ministry. With the teams that you're developing, you have to know their spot. Because I believe that with all my heart, there's a spiritual authority. And if you start answering to your authority in a way that's outside of biblical authority, you're heading in the wrong direction. Don't let the cart lead the horse. You have to know your place where you're at. So the three things again were know your people, know your plan, and know your place. Once you know these three things, you can begin to structure your ministry with health. Thank you.